Lotte takes a new leap beyond its boundaries. Our change will lead to better lives for all. New Lotte, the power of a better world. New today, better tomorrow. Lotte.
Coming up on Arirang News. Seoul and Tokyo officials sat down Friday to discuss sending a South Korean team of experts later this month to check the safety of Japan's planned Fukushima wastewater release. But the two countries had been at odds over the scope of the inspection, not likely to involve sampling. For 4 months in a row, the South Korean government diagnoses that the country's economy is slowing down amid sluggish exports. It's been 1 year since South Korea's former presidential office, Cheong Wa Dae, or the Blue House, was opened to the public. Tonight, we take a look at Cheong Wa Dae's past, present, and future. Good evening. It's 9 p.m. here in South Korea. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. We begin with the working level talks today in the Korean capital between Seoul and Tokyo. South Korean and Japanese officials have sat down for consultations over a sensitive pending issue: on-site inspection by a Korean team for Fukushima wastewater safety checks later this month. For more updates, we have our foreign affairs correspondent Choi Min-jung on the line with us. So Min-jung, are the talks over?
Well, not yet, Jiang. Several hours have passed, but the meeting seems to be still going on. The discussions are currently being led by South Korea's Yoon Hyun-soo, head for climate change, energy, environment, and scientific affairs, and Japan's Atsushi Kaihu, Director General of the Disarmament, Non-Proliferation, and Science Department. Although we don't have the details yet, they are likely to have talked about the role of the inspection team. Earlier on Friday, Seoul's Office for Government Policy Coordination hinted that the dispatch team will check Japan's wastewater treatment capacity, discharge facilities, and ability to analyze radioactive materials, and also identify necessary information for more in-depth scientific analysis. The team will likely be composed of around 20 top-notch safety experts, and it also underscored that South Korea will be the first and only IAEA member country to conduct an on-site inspection in Japan. But the two countries had been at odds over the scope of the inspection, as Tokyo earlier this week downplayed the scope of the visit, saying the purpose is not to evaluate or certify the safety of the treated water. Instead, it said it hoped that the inspection will help deepen South Korea's understanding about the safety of the release. The arrangement comes amid rising concerns over health hazards posed by Japan's dumping of radioactive wastewater. And due to such concerns, South Korea and neighboring countries have been demanding Japan halt the planned release, which is scheduled for summer. And the leaders of the two countries during their recent summit agreed to dispatch a team of Korean experts to inspect the safety of the wastewater. Meanwhile, the IAEA is currently carrying out a separate investigation and is set to announce its final safety report in June. Back to you, Jiang.
Thank you, Min-jung. That was our Choi Min-jung from South Korea's Foreign Ministry. Meanwhile, President Yoon Suk-yeol invited former Japanese Prime Minister Taro Aso for dinner at his residence on Thursday and called for the latter's support in further advancing bilateral ties. Mr. Aso, for his part, made note of President Yoon's efforts thus far, adding that there have been significant steps forward since the launch of the Yoon administration. The former Japanese leader serves as vice head of the country's ruling Liberal Democratic Party and is currently here for a forum on this Friday. He also chairs a civilian committee on South Korea-Japan cooperation and was in Seoul last November when he also met President Yoon. A U.S. default will have grave national as well as international implications. This, according to the International Monetary Fund, and the severity of the situation could make President Joe Biden's participation in the upcoming G7 summit uncertain. Lee Seung-jae tells us more.
According to the International Monetary Fund on Thursday, A potential U.S. default caused by the failure to raise its debt ceiling would have very serious repercussions for the country's economy as well as the global economy. Speaking at a news briefing, IMF spokesperson Julie Kozak warned that authorities need to stay vigilant on new vulnerabilities in the U.S. banking sector due to likely higher borrowing costs. She added that higher interest would also bring about broader instability in the global economy. A similar warning was issued by U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, who said a default on U.S. payments could come as early as June 1st if Congress fails to raise the borrowing cap. And a U.S. default would mean much more than just further instability in the global economy.
A default would threaten the gains that we've worked so hard to make over the past few years in our pandemic recovery, and it would spark a global downturn that would set us back much further. It would also risk undermining U.S. global economic leadership and raise questions about our ability to defend our national security interests.
In response to a possible U.S. default, J.P. Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon said his company has convened a weekly war room. He added that war room sessions will become more frequent, potentially several times a day, as June 1st approaches. Dimon also warned that a potential default would spark panic among investors in the U.S. and will trickle into the global stock markets. Meanwhile, President Joe Biden on Wednesday hinted that he may attend the upcoming G7 summit in Hiroshima, Japan virtually or not go at all, depending on the course of his negotiations with congressional leaders on the debt ceiling. His comments came a day after talks with congressional leaders failed to produce a breakthrough. While Biden said he's still committed to attending the gathering of the 7 major economies, the debt issue remains the single most important thing on the agenda at the moment for the U.S. leader. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
For 4 straight months, South Korea's finance ministry assesses that the country's economy is slowing down amid sluggish exports. Our Lee Soo-jin has more on the latest findings.
South Korea continues to grapple with a sluggish economy. The Finance Ministry's Economic Green Book released on Friday shows that the economy is losing steam largely due to sluggish exports. This is the 4th consecutive month that the report has said there is a slowdown in the economy. Exports in April plunged around 14% compared to the previous year to around $50 billion, declining for the 7th straight month. Out of the 15 major export items, only 3, ships, automobiles, and general machinery, showed an on-year increase. Semiconductors, the nation's key export item, plunged 41% compared to the previous year. The country has been battling a trade deficit for 14 consecutive months as exports continue their downward trend. The employment rate among those aged 15 and above stood at more than 62%, up 0.6 percentage points on year last month. This was largely driven by the rise in employment in the service industry, such as the food and accommodation sector, with the lifting of COVID-19 restrictions. Meanwhile, facility investment in March also dropped 2.2% compared to the previous month, as investment in transportation equipment fell nearly 10%. The nation's current account surplus, however, came to $270 million in March, and April's current account is also expected to show a surplus. Domestic demand is also showing signs of moderate recovery. Retail sales, an indicator of private spending, rose 0.5% on year, with the increase in tourists from China. The number of Chinese tourists that visited South Korea last month soared by more than 1,000% compared to a year ago. There's also some positive news when it comes to inflation, as the nation's consumer price growth slowed to 3.7% in April, falling below 4% for the first time in 14 months. One expert said that consumer prices will continue their downward trend.
Consumer prices have already fallen to the 3% range with domestic demand, so prices will see a steeper decline as demand is likely to go down.
Meanwhile, the government plans to focus on implementing economic policies that will improve exports, investment, and domestic demand. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
In other news, Korea's state-run Electric Power Corporation rolls out self-rescue measures over mounting deficit prior to its CEO has offered to resign. Next week, the government will likely announce rate hikes. Our Lee Dae-yeon reports.
South Korea's state-run power company Korea Electric Power Corporation on Friday released measures to overcome its ballooning deficit. Through this plan, KEPCO aims to have saved more than 25 trillion won, or almost $19 billion by 2026. Part of its self-rescued measures includes selling its southern Seoul headquarters in the financial district of Yeouido, as well as other buildings owned by its affiliates. Freezing the wages of their employees was also brought up. High-ranking officials will return some of their pay rises from this year so that this money can be used to support low-income households struggling to pay their utility bills. The company plans to sit down with the labor union to talk about all 23,000 KEPCO workers joining the move to freeze wages or return raises. It will also reorganize the company's structure to reduce expenses while postponing some of its construction plans for electricity facilities. KEPCO has logged a huge deficit of around $142 billion due to soaring energy prices and limited electricity rate hikes amid high inflation. One official says it will implement these measures as early as possible to overcome the financial crisis. Meanwhile, the chief of KEPCO, Jeong Seung-il, offered to resign on the same day, taking responsibility for the mounting losses of the company. The Korea Gas Corporation, too, announced cost-cutting measures such as freezing the wages of senior officials, as up until March, the company had $8.6 billion worth of uncollected payments. Following these decisions, the government will be making the announcement on the second quarter utility bills decision next Monday. According to forecasts made by the government and industry insiders, electricity rates are expected to be raised by 7 won per kilowatt. With this raise, a family of 4 will be paying an average of around $1.8 more. Household gas prices are forecasted to be raised by about 5.4 won per megajoule. Lee Dae-yeon, Arirang News.
The South Korean Air Force on Friday kicked off its week-long intensive training, codenamed the Soaring Eagle. This is a biannual exercise held since 2008 that aims to strengthen the force's aerial defense and combat skills. Over 60 advanced aircraft, including the KF-16 and FA-50 fighters, will take to the skies near Cheongju Air Base, along with a team of 260 personnel. This large-scale event will simulate different scenarios of enemy attacks. Its primary objective is to sharpen the skills of combat aviators, enabling them to swiftly target and neutralize enemy missiles and disrupt supply routes. The World Health Organization declares mpox no longer a global health emergency. This follows a similar declaration for COVID-19 last week. Yoon has more on its decision.
The World Health Organization declared mpox, formerly known as monkeypox, a public health emergency of international concern in July of 2022, reconfirming that status in November and again as recently as February. However, on Thursday, the WHO's Director General Tedros Ghebreyesus declared an end to the disease's 10-month-long emergency status based on recommendations from the organization's emergency committee. More than 87,000 mpox cases have been confirmed globally, including 140 deaths in the period between January 2022 and April 2023. And in the past 3 months, almost 90% fewer mpox cases were reported compared to the previous 90 days.
Yesterday, the Emergency Committee for Mpox met and recommended to me that the multi-country outbreak of Mpox no longer represents a public health emergency of international concern. I have accepted that advice, and I'm pleased to declare that the Mpox is no longer a global health emergency.
The recent figures suggest that mpox is under control. Nicola Lowe, vice chair of the WHO's Emergency Committee on Mpox, said that the number of cases is falling, but transmission continues to circulate. But the disease needs strategic management in the long term, rather than relying on emergency measures. The viral disease spreads through direct contact with bodily fluids and causes flu-like symptoms and pus-filled skin lesions, and cases were reported in more than 100 countries. The transition now means response and preparedness to tackle the disease will be moved to disease surveillance programs at a national level, as is the case for diseases like HIV. Yoon, Arirang News.
Wednesday this week marked the one-year anniversary of South Korea's former presidential office, Cheong Wa Dae, or the Blue House, being fully open to the public. Since then, Cheong Wa Dae has transformed into a popular tourist destination with millions visiting over the past year. Our culture correspondent Song Yoo-jin took a look around Cheong Wa Dae and looked into its past, present, future, and which cultural events have taken place there.
It's been a year since the Blue House opened its doors to the public. The former presidential office is now a cultural landmark. Cheong Wa Dae had a long history before serving Korean presidents, stretching all the way back to the 12th century and the Goryeo dynasty.
The Cheong Wa Dae area was part of Namgyong, one of the 3 administrative districts of Goryeo. It became the back garden of Gyeongbokgung Palace during the Joseon dynasty. During the Japanese colonial period, it was where the Japanese Government General of Korea was located.
Since the establishment of the Korean government in 1948, 12 presidents from Lee Seung-man to Moon Jae-in have called Cheong Wa Dae their home and office. Before opening to the public on May 10, 2022, the area was closed off for security reasons, offering tours from time to time.
So a year has passed since Cheong Wa Dae first opened to the public, and as you can see, this area is still bustling with a lot of visitors here to take a look into the former presidential office.
I came here when I was in high school, but back then I couldn't go inside the buildings. Now I can really feel that Cheong Wa Dae has returned to the public.
I think the building itself represents a whole authority, and it represents also something, I think, much bigger than just Seoul. Since it was the presidential palace for many presidents to come, and I think that's why it's a must-see place. You have.
More than 3.4 million people have visited so far, more than 1 million the number of visitors last year to the 4 main royal palaces in Seoul combined. The Culture Ministry now aims to make Cheong Wa Dae one of the country's most prominent landmarks. One expert advises integrating history with the latest trends.
Instead of simply showcasing Cheong Wa Dae's history, we should create trendy cultural content and tour programs. Cheong Wa Dae could be the center of a new tourism cluster, as it's located near popular tourist spots like the National Folk Museum, Bukchon Hanok Village, and Gyeongbokgung Palace.
Cheong Wa Dae has exciting plans for the remainder of the year, including exhibitions, tour programs, outdoor music concerts, and a festival for artists with disabilities. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News.
Up next, those interested in the taste of tea should plan a trip to Hadong County in Gyeongsang-namdo Province this weekend. The county is currently hosting its World Tea Expo for this year, and our Choi So-young had the pleasure of being there.
Hadong-gun County is Gyeongsang-namdo Province is famous for its wild green tea. It's been the hub of Korean tea culture since the Shilla era, some 1,200 years ago. Hadong-gun County includes parts of Chirisan National Park and offers beautiful views of the mountains under the blue sky with clear air and fresh water. The air is full of the scent of tea, and within this rich tea culture, the 2023 World Tea Expo Hadong is finally happening after being delayed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. As well as the expo, visitors can take a tour along a beautiful healing road from Cheongum Tea Farm to Sangye Temple, the first tea plantation in South Korea.
I like green tea so much, and I've wanted to come to see the guide dog Tom. The way to a pavilion at the top may be a little boring, but climbing with Tom is an exciting experience, so that's why I've come here.
On the way, visitors can see the unique attraction of the Toshim Tea Farm, which has a 1,000-year-old tea tree. The other trees here all come from its lineage, creating a large farm that is unique to Korea.
I don't know, we've come here to see the tea fields. We're on a trip, 2-week trip around Korea. We wanted to go into the country a little bit, see something a bit different. We're staying in the mountains a bit higher. Do some walks, and there's a tea expo on, so we've come to see that as well.
So this is our first time to Korea, and we've come to Hadong for the first time. Sadly, we missed the blossom, but we're very excited that we're going to get to see the tea expedition. We're amazed at how beautiful it is, and just how pristine and well kept everything is, and how friendly everyone has been, so welcoming as well.
At the end of the tour, visitors can see people who cultivate tea by hand, just like they did 1,000 years ago. They believe that this old, traditional way is the best way of protecting Korean tea culture. The expo will be held until June 3rd, and the committee said that this World Tea Expo Hadong aims to make people healthier and happier through Korean tea culture. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News, Hadong.
Meanwhile, in football, South Korea's opponents for the group stage of the Asian Cup next year in Qatar have been revealed. The Taega Warriors have been drawn into Group E with Bahrain, Jordan, and Malaysia. Korea is the highest-ranked team in this group, standing at 27th in the FIFA rankings. The Asian Cup will be hosted by Qatar from January 12th to February 10th. China was originally scheduled to host the tournament this summer, but changes were made last May in light of Beijing's zero-COVID policy. Rural areas in South Korea often suffer from labor shortages due to the country's aging population. A research team here in the nation have developed an artificial intelligence robot system that may be able to solve this problem. Jung Eun-ju has the details.
This is an indoor tomato farm. It's harvest season and the farm is full of ripe red tomatoes, but there are no people, only rectangular robots. One passes between the rows and uses a camera to recognize the size and color of the tomatoes, while artificial intelligence determines whether the produce is ready for harvest. When the robot decides the tomato is ready for harvesting, it stops moving and extends its robotic arm. The arm grabs the top of the tomatoes, cuts them off with a pair of scissors, and places them in a box attached to the back of the robot. When the box is full, the harvesting robot calls for the delivery robot, which then transports them to the loading dock. Several robots team up in this way to complete difficult tasks on the farm.
There are situations where crops are not harvested even after growing, so they get ploughed. To solve these problems, we developed a harvesting and transporting system using robots.
This robot's accuracy in recognizing crops was over 90%. When operated 24 hours a day, it showed roughly 80% efficiency compared to humans.
Through continued testing and development, we aim to develop a system that can also be applied to various environments, such as outdoors.
Scientists expect a robot system can be helpful in solving the problem of labor shortages on farms. Jung Eun-ju, Arirang News.
Under clear skies, readings will cool down a tad for Seoul this weekend. A big fluctuation in daily temperatures will continue as a high-pressure system continues to bring unseasonable heat to central regions. For the south of the country, such as Pohang, much breezier spells are expected. Showers are in the forecast for parts of the south. For Jeju Island, rain has already started tonight. By tomorrow, the south coast will also see rainfall of 5 to 20 millimeters. For other inland regions, including parts of Gangwon-do and Chungcheongbuk-do provinces, sudden showers are possible. Central regions and the surrounding areas will see strong UV rays. To avoid any skin aggravation, do consider wearing a hat or sunscreen when heading out. Tomorrow, Seoul and Gyeongju will be starting off at 13 degrees. Highs in Seoul and Daejeon will be reaching 24, Chuncheon 25, Busan will be breezy at 18 degrees. On Sunday, inland regions may see scattered outbreaks of rainfall. Have a great weekend, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is all for this Friday night newscast. Thank you for watching. Hope everyone has a great weekend and a good night.
I'm live! 저를 도와주시는 분들이
저희와 함께 해주시는 세션분들
아무리 봐도 없지 펜션 같은데 아니라고 아무도 안 하는 거고
좋아요.